I had an odd childhood. It was a lot more messed up than I thought.
So your dad was the janitor, your mom was the janitor,
We were
and you were the
janitors
dad.
and security guards.
Right.
I had to do the whole thing, but the whole time I was singing and I was dreaming.
Many who once laughed endlessly at Jim Carrey's wild energy were stunned when, at 61, he called an interview his last. The comedy legend finally admitted the truth. For decades, people sensed pain behind the humor. In 2025, he revealed he had been on Prozac since the 1980s, living with a constant low-level sadness. But the real shock was deeper: his father's self-harm attempts and his own breaking point. Suddenly, every movie feels different. So, was the laughter pure comedy, or was it survival hiding in plain sight? Jim Carrey's rise through pain and persistence. In 1982, Jim came home and found his father, Percy Carrey, lying unconscious on the bathroom floor. An empty bottle of pills sat nearby. Jim was just 20. His hands were shaking as he screamed into the phone for help. Paramedics rushed Percy to Joseph Brandt Hospital, and doctors managed to save him, only by minutes. Later, Percy admitted something even more painful. This was not his first attempt. He had tried 2 times before, back when the family had been living in a van, broke and struggling to survive. That truth haunted Jim. He feared that the same darkness that pulled his father down might one day pull him down too. That fear became fuel. It pushed him to work harder than anyone else. It became the reason he could never relax, never stop chasing success. When Jim was 15, Percy had driven him to Yuck Yuck's Comedy Club in Toronto for his first real stand-up performance. His mother proudly dressed him in a bright polyester leisure suit because she believed that was what comedians on TV wore. Jim walked on stage full of hope. The act failed badly. The clapping was weak and awkward. But on the drive home, Percy didn't yell or criticize. He was quiet and proud. That night, Jim learned something powerful. Bombing on stage was not death. It was practice. It was training. On his 16th birthday, Jim dropped out of school completely. The family was still drowning in debt. Everyone worked factory or janitor shifts just to eat. Jim worked 12-hour night shifts and sometimes slept in the van between jobs. But even during those exhausting nights, he dreamed of stage lights and applause. On his breaks, he secretly practiced comedy. He copied performers like Don Adams and W.C. Fields, using impressions to keep his creativity alive. Not long before, he had been a straight-A student. Now he was angry, quiet, and carrying heavy emotions. Comedy became his oxygen. It gave him a reason to keep breathing. Meanwhile, the family was breaking apart under the weight of poverty. His siblings moved away. His father sank deeper into depression. His mother's use of painkillers slowly turned into addiction. Jim once said, "If you're high on painkillers, that's abandonment." He would sit at the dinner table listening to her say frightening things like, "My brain is deteriorating at an incredible rate," or "I could go at any time." Those words burned into his memory. At 17, he earned his first real pay as a comedian, $20 for a 20-minute set at a small club called The Hoft. It wasn't much money, but it proved something important. His jokes had value. In 1980, he auditioned for Saturday Night Live for the first time. He believed this was his big break, but he never even got to meet Lorne Michaels. The producers rejected him, saying they didn't think Lorne would like his act. He was crushed. That rejection hurt for years, but it also forced him to stop copying other comedians and begin creating original characters. Behind his wild humor were invisible scars. He had been bullied in school for being poor. Kids mocked his clothes. Sometimes he felt so numb and desperate that he hurt himself just to feel something real. Years later, in the documentary Jim and Andy, The Great Beyond, he spoke openly about those painful moments. Some footage was so raw that producers locked it away for nearly 20 years. In 1981, at 19, Jim landed his first television role in a small Canadian film called Introducing Janet, later renamed Rubberface. He played a struggling comedian named Tony, a character that felt almost exactly like himself. The film did not make him famous, but it gave him experience. That same year, with only $200 in his pocket, he moved from Toronto to Los Angeles. He slept on couches in comedy clubs and survived on free food. He auditioned anywhere that would let him in the door. By 1982, he was performing regularly at the Comedy Store, the legendary club where stars like Richard Pryor and Robin Williams had once ruled the stage. One night, Rodney Dangerfield saw Jim perform. He loved what he saw and invited him to join his 1982 to 1983 tour. Jim was the youngest comedian on the lineup, performing in front of thousands, yet still barely able to afford one meal a day. In 1983, he earned just $50 per week, doing sketches on a show called The Sex and Violence Family Hour. He slept in an empty apartment with no furniture and lived mostly on instant noodles. In 1984, he starred in the sitcom The Duck Factory, about a cartoon studio. It was canceled after only 13 episodes. Once again, he fell into debt. Still, he refused to quit. In 1985, he appeared in the film Once Bitten. The movie earned $19 million on a $1.5 million budget. Critics were not impressed, but audiences noticed him. The flexible-faced kid from Ontario was suddenly on Hollywood's radar. But success brought new problems. Around that time, he was arrested for marijuana possession. He had a brief affair with Mia Farrow. He began depending on illegal substance to survive long nights of rehearsals. He later called that period one of the darkest chapters of his life. He auditioned again for Saturday Night Live in 1983 and 1986, rejected every time. His final audition ended badly when a Robin Williams impression failed to impress. How did he rise to fame? And what made him to fall? Let's find out. The rise and collapse of Jim Carrey. In 1990, at just 28, Jim Carrey stepped onto the stage of In Living Color, and nothing was the same again. The hit Fox sketch comedy show didn't just push limits, it smashed them completely. From his very first appearance, Jim's energy felt electric and almost wild. While others performed, he exploded. His face stretched, his body twisted, and his voice bounced from high to low in seconds. Over 5 seasons, he created more than 120 sketches, but one character rose above the rest. Fire Marshal Bill, his face melted, hair burnt, eyes wide and crazy, would shout, "You can call me Bill." Audiences laughed, but they also felt uncomfortable in the best way. It was comedy that made you gasp and giggle at the same time. The show began pulling in millions of viewers, and Jim quickly became the most talked-about performer. What made it even more surprising was that he was the breakout star of a show built around black comedy powerhouses like the Wayans brothers. Jim didn't just fit in, he stood out, but behind the bright lights, he was pushing himself too far. To create outrageous characters like Vera DeMilo, a grotesque female bodybuilder, and wild parodies of Ice-T, Jim treated his body like rubber. He would gain or lose 20 pounds in a single week. He slammed into walls, bent himself into painful shapes, and even hit himself just to get a bigger laugh. Critics started whispering about Emmy nominations. Meanwhile, his body was quietly breaking down. In 1992, during one sketch, he twisted his ankle while dancing. Instead of resting, he kept filming the entire week in pain. At that time, he was earning $25,000 per episode and had just bought his first home in Los Angeles. Success was pouring in, but so was pressure. To survive the brutal 80-hour work weeks, he began using Adderall. It kept him awake and sharp, but inside, it was wearing him down. At the same time, his personal life was falling apart. He had met Melissa Woomer in 1984 while working on The Duck Factory. She knew him before the fame, before the madness. But once In Living Color became a sensation, everything changed. Long nights, strip clubs, rumors, lies. By 1995, she filed for divorce, accusing him of cheating and saying he was no longer the man she married. While audiences laughed at his characters, his marriage was quietly collapsing. The show itself also began facing trouble. During the 1992 to 1993 seasons, sketches pushed boundaries so far that Fox executives panicked. A controversial segment called Homeboys, which mocked gang culture, pulled in over 10 million viewers, but also sparked serious complaints. Network leaders fought with creators over what was too far. Jim didn't hold back. He mocked race, religion, and everything in between. The tension grew heavy. In 1994, he stepped away from the show, but he didn't fade. He blasted off. That same year, Ace Ventura, Pet Detective, hit theaters. Few expected a strange, loud pet detective movie made on a $15 million budget to change comedy history. But it shocked everyone. The film made $72 million in the United States alone. Jim improvised nearly 40% of his lines. When he shouted, "Alrighty then," kids across the country repeated it the next day. When he first auditioned, he barely followed the script. Instead, he did random impressions of Ray Charles and Tony Bennett. It made no sense on paper, but in the room, it was magic. He beat out 19 other actors. Actress Sean Young was originally cast, but clashed with Jim and the director and was replaced by Courtney Cox. As filming went on, the movie slowly reshaped itself around Jim's unpredictable energy. He improvised constantly. In one scene, he randomly grabbed a musician's arm mid-performance just to see what would happen. The crew kept it in. Scenes needed 20 takes because the crew couldn't stop laughing. He dyed his hair, lived in the character's apartment set, and stayed in character for hours. The line between Jim and Ace blurred quickly. For Ace Ventura, he earned $350,000. After its success, his salary exploded. $7 million for Dumb and Dumber, and then $20 million for The Cable Guy. In just a short time, he went from TV oddball to Hollywood's highest-paid comedy star. During the promotional tour for Dumb and Dumber, the pressure finally cracked him. But what is the hidden side of Jim? Is there something he didn't tell his fans? Let's find out. The secret side of Jim Carrey. The money from merchandise was huge. More than 1 million Ace Ventura dolls sold in a short time. There were lunchboxes, t-shirts, toys. Everywhere you looked, you saw Ace's smiling face. But Jim Carrey wasn't happy. In 1995, he sued Warner Brothers for $20 million. He said they used his face in video games without asking him. At that time, he was the biggest comedy star in the world. Yet, he felt like he didn't even own his own smile. The case became important for celebrity image rights, but for Carrey, it felt deeply personal. Then came Ace Ventura, When Nature Calls. For the sequel, he demanded $15 million plus a share of the movie's profits. It became one of the biggest comedy paydays ever. The film made $212 million worldwide, but Carrey hated parts of the script. He didn't like the animal cruelty jokes and some offensive scenes. On set, he tried to change lines and make them safer. He argued with writers and improvised better jokes, but some scenes still stayed in the final cut. Animal rights activists criticized the movie, saying it disrespected sacred animals. On the outside, Carrey kept making people laugh. Inside, he felt uncomfortable about what the film had become. That same year, The Mask exploded in theaters. Made for $18 million, it earned $352 million worldwide, becoming the fourth highest-grossing film of 1994. The green face wasn't just makeup. The effects were created by industrial light and magic. More than 200 scenes used visual effects. Carrey wore heavy prosthetics for up to 12 hours a day. Sometimes they irritated and burned his skin, but it was worth it. The film received an Oscar nomination for Best Visual Effects. It lost to Forrest Gump, but Carrey still felt victorious. He helped bring swing music back into style, turned Cameron Diaz into a star, and proved he could carry a movie with wild, fearless energy. Soon after, Dumb and Dumber arrived. It cost $17 million and earned $270 million worldwide, later becoming a cult favorite. Carrey wrote about 30% of Lloyd's lines. The famous "We got no food, we got no jobs" moment was pure improvisation. Filming was chaotic. One loud scene delayed a real wedding nearby. Carrey tried to perform a snowboarding stunt himself, broke his ankle, and still finished the scene, limping and in pain. His co-star Jeff Daniels almost froze to a ski lift pole. The crew had to pour warm water to free him. But success didn't protect Carrey from problems. In 1994, Fox Broadcasting Company sued him for $10 million over in living color residual payments. The case was settled privately. That same year, the film industry paid him about $20 million. Yet, at the MTV Movie Awards, he collapsed on stage. He whispered that he needed a break. He was exhausted and paranoid. The crowd cheered, thinking it was part of the act. Backstage, he admitted he couldn't keep pretending. He had made the world laugh, but he felt like he was running out of air. When he filmed The Truman Show, the pressure became even more intense. Director Peter Weir pushed him hard. The famous storm scene alone took 150 takes. The crew built a giant water tank as big as a football field, creating an artificial ocean and storm. Water crashed into Carrey from every side while he held onto a boat, strapped into a harness that felt like a seatbelt during a car crash. At one point, the storm became so dangerous that he nearly drowned. Crew members had to jump in and pull him out, but when Truman finally touched the wall of his fake world and escaped, it took just one take. That moment became one of the most unforgettable scenes in movie history. The movie cost $60 million and earned $264 million worldwide. Carrey's performance was so powerful that audiences didn't laugh much. They simply watched in silence. He didn't just act inside that giant dome set. He lived there. For weeks, he barely left. He stopped calling his family and avoided talking to people outside the scenes. He wanted to truly feel alone, just like Truman. The isolation made his performance stronger, but it also created tension. He argued with Peter Weir over creative control, and even asked for a $20 million bonus if he won a Golden Globe. However, Jim Carrey had conquered comedy. But what silent battle was he fighting? Was it emotional or psychological? Let's find out. Carrey's self-destructive roles. When Jim Carrey took on Man on the Moon in 1999, he didn't just act like Andy Kaufman. He became him completely. He dropped 40 pounds to fit Kaufman's physique. He watched countless hours of Kaufman performances until every gesture, every tick, lived in his bones. Carrey stayed in character all the time. During meetings, rehearsals, even when cameras weren't rolling. Danny DeVito couldn't handle it and needed breaks just to catch his breath. In one of the final scenes, Carrey even injected himself with saline to simulate cancer symptoms. The pain looked real because it was. The film earned $50 million, and Carrey won his second Golden Globe. But the victory hid a personal heartbreak. After just 1 year of marriage, he and Lauren Holly divorced. He admitted he could no longer connect emotionally. A later documentary revealed how deeply Carrey had sunk into Kaufman's mind. It wasn't acting anymore, it was self-destruction. Back in 1995, while filming Batman Forever, Carrey brought the Riddler to life with wild, unpredictable energy. He crafted 20 custom canes, each unique. The movie was a massive hit, making $336 million worldwide. Yet behind the scenes, Carrey was unraveling. Anxiety gnawed at him, and he began taking Valium just to stay calm. Rumors of his struggles spread on set. He and Tommy Lee Jones often clashed as tensions rose. This was the first time Carrey's emerging addiction truly revealed itself. What appeared as playful on-screen masked chaos and turmoil off-camera. Then came Liar in 1997. The film pulled in $300 million, powered by Carrey's genius improvisation. He ad-libbed nearly 60% of his lines. Courtroom scenes became wild, spontaneous, and electric. But 3 years later, Carrey sued Universal Studios for a $2 million bonus. he claimed they owed him. The legal battle turned ugly, accusing the studio of withholding royalties. Though it was quietly settled, the damage lingered. The film remained a fan favorite, but the scar behind the scenes was deep. During The Cable Guy in 1996, things got even darker. The movie earned only $12 million, but off-screen, it was chaos. Carrey became Chip Douglas completely, tormenting co-star Matthew Broderick even off-camera. Broderick later admitted, "I don't know how to react anymore." On one shoot, after unpredictable scenes, both men ended up with mud in their eyes. Broderick's cornea tore. Another day, he waited 14 hours in his trailer due to constant delays. The dark comedy was meant to entertain, but it became an unsettling experiment in how far Carrey could push both himself and others. When Carrey portrayed the Grinch in 2000, it was a triumph for audiences, but torture for him. The film made $345 million, yet Carrey spent 2.5 hours daily in suffocating prosthetic makeup. Moving was almost impossible. Sweat poured constantly, and repairs were frequent. He demanded retakes, chasing perfection relentlessly. The makeup team earned an Oscar, but Carrey walked away with back pain and months of exhaustion. The success was massive, but the cost etched itself into his body and mind. Tragedy struck in 2015 when Katharina White, an Irish makeup artist, and Carrey's on and off partner, died from an overdose. She left a note blaming Carrey for mental abuse and providing the pills. Her estate sued, alleging he gave her STDs and painkillers, abandoning her when she was most vulnerable. The case shocked the industry. Investigators discovered missing pill bottles and texts suggesting he might have known the danger. Carrey's team called it extortion, and the lawsuit was dismissed in 2018, but the stain never fully faded. In Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, 2004, Carrey ventured into entirely new territory. No laughs, no gags, no routines. Director Michel Gondry often didn't even call action, wanting Carrey to truly be lost in the moment. And he was. Shot over 17-hour days with no safety net, the $72 million film demanded everything from him. Carrey shaved his head for a scene, leaving him depressed for months. Though his performance was raw and emotional, the toll was real. So, how was his life beyond fame? Was it all rosy? Let's take a closer look. A life beyond the spotlight. In 2012, Jim Carrey's daughter, Jane, was diagnosed with autism. By 2018, their relationship had become distant, with Jane openly criticizing some of his more toxic beliefs. Carrey often spoke about his father, Percy, who had lost his job when Jim was still a child. The family struggled through poverty, cleaning factory floors just to get by. Percy passed away in 2006, and Carrey wrote a $10 million check for his father's funeral. He described it as a full-circle moment, from scraping by in a tiny camper van to being able to bury his dad like a king. Even after hinting at retirement in 2018, Carrey returned to the big screen in 2020 with Sonic the Hedgehog, which raked in $319 million worldwide. He joked that he came back for the money, admitting, "I bought a lot of stuff." And he wasn't exaggerating. He personally earned $30 million for Sonic 3. The filmmakers had gone so far as to print his script in real 24-karat gold ink just to convince him to join. "It was magic," he said, explaining why he returned. He never really left. In 2014, Dumb and Dumber to surprised audiences by earning $166 million. Even though critics panned it, Carrey dropped 30 pounds to reprise the role of Lloyd. The film nearly didn't happen. He had quit in 2012, only returning when Jeff Daniels insisted he couldn't do it without him. The script had been rushed in just 3 weeks. Carrey later criticized the movie, calling it lazy. The production company became embroiled in a scandal involving stolen Malaysian funds and eventually had to settle for $60 million. But the movie still sold tickets. By 2022, depression returned. Carrey described it as a low-level despair that never left and revealed that Prozac had been part of his life since the 1980s. In 2017, he nearly died from pneumonia while filming Sonic the Hedgehog 2, which forced him to slow down. He eventually quit medication, deciding it was better to feel pain than feel nothing at all. He began speaking openly about therapy and personal healing. This delayed Sonic 3, but reminded the world that he was human. Back in 2007, the number 23 had flopped, earning only $37 million, but the movie haunted Carrey more than any blockbuster ever could. He became obsessed with the number 23, seeing it everywhere, in street signs, clocks, phone numbers. He even started studying numerology. And after the film, he went into therapy to separate fiction from reality. He vowed never to take on such dark roles again. In Kick-Ass 2, he played Colonel Stars, but after the Sandy Hook school shooting, he refused to promote the film, saying he could not support a project filled with so much violence. The movie made $60 million, but Carrey's silence spoke louder than the box office ever could. By 2024, he returned for Sonic 3, spending 3 hours each morning gluing on a mustache for the role. Another $30 million deal. He laughed about needing money, saying he'd bought too many houses. And yes, the gold ink script really happened. Carrey admitted that such gestures made him feel alive. It wasn't just about money, it was magic. In 2017, he stunned the world during a Fashion Week interview, declaring, "There is no me." He wasn't trying to be clever, he truly felt it. Years of meditation and study had led him to a state where he no longer identified as a person, but as part of everything. By 2025, Jim Carrey's films had earned over $1 billion. He had won 2 Golden Globes, but never an Oscar. He once reflected, "Everyone should get rich and famous just to learn that it doesn't fix anything." His most iconic year remained 1994. When Ace Ventura, The Mask, and Dumb and Dumber came out in rapid succession. But what are Jim Carrey challenges, and how was his early childhood? Let's find out. Jim Carrey's early struggles. Jim Carrey was born on January 17, 1962, in the small town of Newmarket. He was the youngest of 4 children, growing up in a loud, crowded house where big dreams clashed with unpaid bills almost every month. Money was always tight, and stress filled the air as much as laughter did. His father, Percy, once followed his passion. He played the saxophone in a jazz band and truly loved music. But love did not pay the bills. In time, he gave up that dream and took a steady job as an accountant at Titan Wheels in Scarborough, earning just $8,000 a year. It was not much for a family of 6, but Percy worked hard and rarely complained. Jim's mother, Kathleen, struggled with illness throughout his childhood. She spent many days in bed, weak and exhausted. This meant young Jim grew up fast. He saw his father's quiet disappointment and his mother's daily pain. He understood early that life could change without warning. When Jim was 8 years old, he discovered something that gave him comfort: the mirror. He would stand in front of it for hours, stretching and twisting his face into wild shapes. He made strange expressions that made his brothers and sisters stop and stare. Making people laugh became his escape from worry. By the time he was 10, his confidence had grown. He sent a letter to Carol Burnett, proudly telling her he was already a master of impressions. She sent back a polite reply. It may have been a simple form letter, but to Jim, it felt like proof that someone important had noticed him. He taped it to his wall like a promise of a brighter future. At school, he could not stop performing. Every classroom became his stage. He copied teachers, imitated movie stars, and made his classmates roar with laughter. The principal often sent him out of class, but Jim did not mind. The other kids called him Rubber Face. For a boy living under constant financial pressure, those laughs were priceless. Then everything changed in 1975. Titan Wheels suddenly shut down. Percy was 51 years old and without a job. He sent out 73 applications to accounting firms across Ontario. One by one, the rejection letters arrived. No one hired him. The family's small savings disappeared quickly. Kathleen's medical bills swallowed what little money they had left. In the end, Percy took a job as a janitor, earning $4 an hour. He cleaned toilets and floors in factories like the one where he had once worked as an accountant. Jim was 13 years old, watching the man he admired most mop floors for people who had once respected him as an equal. The humiliation hurt deeply. Within months, the family lost their home. From 1974 to 1976, the Carreys lived in a yellow Volkswagen camper van parked near Lake Ontario. Percy and Kathleen slept inside the van. Jim and his brother John pitched a small tent beside it. Even during freezing Canadian nights, they often woke up with frost covering their sleeping bags. Before school, they washed their faces in gas station sinks, trying to look normal. Some days were so hard that Jim searched dumpsters for expired sandwiches. He warmed them on the van's tiny stove and shared them with his family. At night, all of them worked together cleaning a local factory. They earned $32 for 8 hours of scrubbing floors and bathrooms. During the day, Jim attended Aldershot High School, exhausted and half asleep. His clothes were not always clean, and his mind often felt numb from lack of rest. By the time he turned 15, his mother's illness had become worse. She could barely walk on her own. Jim began missing classes to help at home. At 16, he made a painful decision. He dropped out of school to work full-time beside his father, earning $4.25 an hour. He cleaned floors all night. At dawn, he returned home, lifted his mother from bed, washed her, prepared her meals, and sat by her side telling jokes just to make her smile. Humor became his way of surviving. So, what do you think about Jim Carrey's shocking revelation? Share your thoughts with us in the comments section. Don't forget to like and subscribe.